mean, the COVID year when it was with Israel, I know there was a bit of a conversation. Like, obviously, you guys had your conversation of this is what we're planning on. Obviously, we're not going, and then there was the outside talk about what was going. What was the kind of emotions for you and for the team when you maybe not you decided, but as an organisation, it was decided you weren't going to Israel.
Yeah. Look, I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody, but I was put in an interesting position. I was actually, when that decision came down, I was called by members of the women's team and asked to essentially represent the players to BAFA to represent our interest because I had a connection on both sides. And I was asked to essentially appeal the decision to not go. And before doing that, we talked to the players on the men's side. I was told that they talked to the players on the women's side. I was told that essentially a great majority of the women wanted to go, and we had a great majority of the men who wanted to go. Plus, you have these silver programs of players that would be interested in stepping in. And I never at any point would have wanted anyone who didn't feel comfortable going because, there was some uncertainty and, people had some different views on things. And, if someone's like, I don't want to go, I don't feel comfortable going, I think that's totally fine and fair. But I was asked to make clear to BAFA that the players themselves wanted to go and were willing to, we had, I was able to secure some funding for sponsorship should we have had any situations where players had to quarantine or things like that and be able to cover the costs of that and such. So, but I think at that point it was just too late. So I think there was, a number of, I know I myself, I was sad about the decision. I know a lot of people were too. And some people I think as well were like, this is a decision that makes sense. So I think I don't really blame anyone for having one side or the other. But I think it was just a tough situation for a lot of reasons, and probably the biggest reason being that was going to be the tournament that if you finished in the top 8, you were going to go to qualify for World Games in Alabama. And obviously the women felt like, they had just finished second in Europe and very, very strong and felt incredibly good about their chances to get in the top 8. And on the men's side, we felt like we were kind of in that battleground. We were anywhere from 6 to 10 probably based on those teams. And so that's right in the area. So I think it was hard for a lot of players to want to compete and to have the decision made to not compete made for them by others. I don't necessarily blame those people, but it was a tough situation, and I think I think it was the wrong decision. I thought it was the wrong decision at the time, but I also don't necessarily blame someone for thinking it was the right decision. It's I think just a tough situation, and it was just stinky to not be able to go. And I think players that wanted to go were upset that they weren't able to go.
Yeah, I know I've spoken to a few players, and it was one of the tournaments. Not only like you said, because it wasn't just it's a championship. It was a stepping stone into another championship, which obviously the Alabama one would have been really great to play in. And obviously, because we didn't, obviously at that point we didn't know what the outcome of the World Games would be. As in, would that be the only time that it was at the World Games?
Sure. Exactly.
So I know there was a lot of talk about it outside of the field, and like you said, I don't think I'd want to be the one kind of saying yes or no either way.
Yeah, I think it was just the situation where I think I tend to be a person that's I'm an adult decision, and players were that's what it is. But I think like that's something that like it's something in the past that's happened that you don't like, and you just kind of ultimately move on. And I think it did provide me personally an opportunity, kind of my next flag opportunity, and that was when we weren't going immediately. A couple of guys on Denmark reached out and like, you guys aren't coming to Israel? No. And then they're like, okay, well, would you be interested in helping us out if we, if and when we qualify for Alabama? And I was like, absolutely. So, the silver lining of it all was it got me the opportunity to work with, a bunch of guys that, frankly, on the flag field and in the film room, I kind of idolized. So I think, as much as I didn't like what happened for Israel, it brought out something really, really positive for me personally.
I mean, one last question on the GB side. This is coming from.
Yeah.
So obviously we put this post out a while back saying if you've got any questions for Vince. This one's from Grace Conway, and she says, "Can you confirm that GB Women's was your favourite coaching role?"
I think Grace and a number of the GB women were really awesome to coach. They were sponges, and I think it was a really fun time to coach them because I think, for especially like the Cougars and a lot of those ladies had been, winning for a long time. In some ways, almost not understanding how they were winning, or I don't want to say not understanding, but maybe like they had been winning, but didn't realize how good they could truly be. And that's only meant as like they figured it out on their own, and all the steps they got were figuring it out on their own. So what was fun was taking, I think Dean, myself, I think we saw the talent, and I think we saw, I remember saying to Dean, like, this is the team that could run Europe in women's for the next 10 years. This can be the new Austria. And that was like a genuine, it's just like, we just got to get it out of them. Because the talent was there, but it was amazing to me how unrefined at the time was. The routing has just improved so much since then. That was the focus of ours at the time, and just like concepts and being intelligent and everything. And that's why you have coaches, because, you can be a really talented player, but like if you don't know what you're doing, you're gonna end up banging your head against the wall, more than you need to. So I would say it was a great experience, and I've made some lasting friendships as a result.
So obviously, like you said there, you haven't been able to go to Israel with Great Britain, but you get the phone call from Denmark saying, "Come join our coaching committee." I mean, what was your first thoughts when Denmark? I mean, obviously you've seen these guys play and you think they are very, very good players. Did you ever kind of think in the back before they even called you? Did you ever kind of think, maybe I'll go to another country and start coaching, or was Denmark kind of like the first step on the way?
I think it was just what made sense. I think what I really appreciated, first kind of like interaction with them happened a little bit with the UK Dukes thing back in 2018 with the IFAF. There were a few of those guys that Kenny Bello put together, and I was there, and so I met a couple of those guys at the time, and then that year we played them in the Jag Sevens, and it was like the Denmark national team against the Button Hookers, and I think they beat us by 1 point. And so I think there was like a degree, I don't want to speak for them, but maybe a degree of some level of respect there. And I just got talking and kind of built up a friendship, relationship, whatever you want to call it, with, a couple of guys there, specifically like Flea, the quarterback. And we would just kind of each other play ideas or different things or stuff that you saw. So it was like, we were before that. Just natural thing. You're not going, talking with Flea and talking with those guys, how they thought about things kind of meshed with how I, with a lot of like probability and how do you increase your expected value and stuff. And what I saw Denmark doing is thinking about things in kind of a similar way. They were very purposeful about why they called what they called when they called on the defensive side of the ball. They were very purposeful about how to think about. It was always a logical approach, and they were very good at looking and being analytical and saying, does this work or not? And saying, I've encountered before, and it's not just in football, but in any area of life, you've encountered somebody you work with. If they have an idea and someone has a different idea, a lot of times people are attached to the idea they have and have trouble emotionally detaching from it and identifying what's best. And what I really admired about what Denmark was doing was, like, you could bring plays together, you could talk about them, and it was just like, boom, this is clearly working. This isn't, like, we go with this. And it was just very matter of fact, very emotionless, and very, very logical, while also leaving room for creativity. And I just really liked the way that they thought about it. And for me also, when I was learning and trying to figure out how to do this and do it well, Flea and Denmark was a team that I watched a ton of film on. So while the Buttonhookers might not have practiced much, I spent a lot of time watching film, and trying to learn and come up with stuff. And it was a lot of, okay, like, what is he doing, and what is his team doing that I can steal, that I can use? And so a lot of it just made sense. There was a lot of logical stuff. It wasn't gimmicky, like some flag teams and plays. You'll see like gimmicky stuff, and their stuff wasn't gimmicky. It was just flat out really precise routes, really precise timing, and they were really good against even teams like USA, and were really, really competitive against them and beating teams like Mexico. Because they had good athletes, but their sense of precision and their sense of this moment means more. It's time to step up, or not, I think was just really, really good. And I think sometimes that, that's something that other teams that I'd been a part of, or not even just in flag football, but just in life, didn't always have that sense. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that have done as well as they have over the years. So it was just, I think it was a good marriage, like, mentally. And then I had the opportunity, and first it was just like learn, and how can I figure out ways to help these guys?
So, I mean, looking at the Danish national team's tournaments and things like that, I mean, which ones have you been involved in with the Danish national team?
So, World Games, and we weren't sure whether that was going to be a one-time thing or not. So I went to World Games in Alabama. And really my role there was just, how can I figure out how to help? And what ended up being was I did a lot of scouting for their defense, actually. And I think kind of going in, we thought maybe I would come up with a lot of different plays or whatever. But it was actually, one of the things I think I'm actually pretty good at is scouting opposing offenses. And so I did a lot of that for them, and paid off really significantly in a few games. So that was really good. And honestly, it felt good to have some of these guys who I really looked up to and really kind of saw as a gold standard turning to me and saying the things that I was doing was helpful. So that was like my role in that tournament. About a month before Euros in Ireland, the coach and Nick reached back out to me and said, "Do you want to come to Ireland?" Like, I had no plans. I hadn't been part of stuff since then. So I kind of showed up, and at that tournament, Flea was no longer the quarterback. Nick was playing quarterback and playing DB, and I still think, like, looking at that tournament, the amount of stuff that he had to do, and the fact that he got the team to the semifinals, running the offense, running the defense, doing all that, like, not to take anything away from Fabi, who did wonderfully winning the MVP, but, like, take Nick away from that Denmark team and what happens. like what he did was just beyond what any player at that Euros did, and I thought he did a great job and got us to the semifinals, running both sides of the ball. So what I did, I still helped on the scouting side, and we did some good work there. And then on the offense, I was essentially always ready to give Nick plays if and when he needed them. Sometimes he just went on his own, and then sometimes he looked to me. And so, I don't know, 40-50% of plays I probably ended up calling for him at that tournament. But it was just, again, that was more of a last-minute thing, no real prep, not even really knowing I was going to be involved until a few weeks beforehand.
My big pop buzz. So the dummies trying to run me, don't try to do nothing funny.
I mean, what was your overall impression, not only of the event itself in Ireland, but the teams that were there? I mean, obviously you've known a lot of these teams for a long time.
Yeah.
Which teams kind of for you kind of like had stepped up in quite a big way?
I think what was interesting to see was at previous Euros or previous international championships, even as you watched, there was this divide between basically the good teams and the not good teams. And there weren't very many like good teams. There was Denmark, there was Mexico, USA, Austria. And then those were kind of the good teams. And everyone else was like a clearly low. And then obviously Italy had, good run, and at that Euros in Israel, okay, like, France was involved, Israel was involved, and Israel's been a good team too. I didn't mean to leave them off the list, but I think there was that kind of clear top group. And when I saw it, Euros was top group wasn't as clear anymore, and part of that I think was teams are getting better. Teams are. I think what's great is we're starting to get to the point where it's just not assumed who's going to win. Like you could go into these tournaments before, and it's just like, yep, this team is playing that team. That team's going to win. Team A is obviously better. But now there's a lot more like, yeah, that team could beat that team. Sure. And I think you started to see that at that Euros. I think the top level wasn't honestly as good as, like, I think the Denmark 2019 Euros team was better than all of the Euros teams that were at Limerick. But I think, the third, fourth, the third through eighth best teams were probably better in Limerick than they were in Israel. And I think you've kind of seen that continue into the Worlds this year, especially the European teams have gotten so tactically smart and intelligent and good at what they do. So I think the game is getting a lot smarter, which is really cool to see.
So when you talk about the top level of the teams that you've seen there, obviously when they went to the World Championships recently, you could see on the scoreboard there was a bit of a divide between USA and a lot of the other teams. I mean, Mexico is normally high up on that list. Obviously, they lost out and ended up with in the third place game, which was a bit. I think there was a lot of people who had a lot of predictions, and it was going to be USA versus Mexico in the final.
Sure. I'm sure everybody thought that. Yeah.
And I think even now, I think people are sitting there going, I'm not too sure what happened to Mexico. But I mean, what do you think is what's needed for teams like your Denmark, Germany, and all the teams like that to kind of get that little bit closer to USA and start really challenging them?
I think what's actually, I appreciate the question, and I'm going to kind of redirect it in a way. I think, or kind of like revisit something. I think what's actually happened in the last year or two, specifically with the USA, is they've really professionalized their process, both in terms of how they select the team and how they coach that team. I have a pretty good relationship with Pat and George, the coaches of Team USA, and talk to them. And I had a few guys from my U.S. team that were invited to trials, and one of the 60 guys. But it's like a very structured process. Like 60 guys get invited, and then it's, hey, I don't care if you've won championships or tournaments in the U.S. before. You playing here for 3-4 days, and how you do those 3-4 days determines who makes this team or not. And how you do can be a little broad. How you play, how you are as a teammate, how you conduct yourself, all those things factor in, of course. But it's like a really clear process, and I think, George and Pat are like no nonsense guys, and it's just, George, runs the offense and kind of works with Hoosh and the guys they have there to optimize an offense around who they have, not take an offense that I like and have you run it. It's like, who do we have and how can we make the best offense based on these skills? And Pat runs a defense, and he doesn't allow guys to not run the defense the way they're supposed to run it. It's like, this is what we're doing. I need you to learn this. This is how we're going to play. This is our identity. This is the thing. These are the things we're going to do. And to be frank, if you're not willing to do it, you're not willing to work hard, we're going to find somebody else. And so I think what actually has happened to the U.S. and why they've separated is like they've really professionalized their approach. They've always had probably better athletes, but they've now taken those superior athletes, put them into a system. I actually think the systems that you have in Europe are still arguably, I could argue that the scouting that we do in Europe and some of the strategy and some of the clock management and stuff is still, it probably is better. Like actually when I go and I play in the US, like I'm probably the best clock manager at the tournament because it's just like not a thing that they think about. So there's still areas that they can get better at that way. But all the things they have professionalized, I think, has widened that gap. So I think right now the big difference is, this is a long-winded way of kind of getting back to the answering your question, is even in the U.S., you have 4 guys. You have Hoosh, Pablo, Belt, and then Mark. Mark is not on the national team. I don't know why. Whatever the reasons may be. And Mark is like all of them, but he's bigger and he's faster. Or, he's as fast and he's 6'2". And I think if you polled most people in the U.S., I think he would be the number one answer of who's the best flag football player. He's not even on the U.S. national. But it's those 4 guys can run and throw and are lightning fast. And defending double QB against them is a whole different thing. Because, yes, any team can run double QB, but at this point, it's like stretching a defense, is turning it into 3-on-3. To be able to run double QB and to have it so the guy actually just like runs and is an option is just like, even at that top level, just doesn't work well unless you're a superior athlete, like a Hoosh, like a Velt, like a Pablo. You even saw it at, to use a UK example, in the final this year, Glasgow was playing Cardiff, and I love Joe Cotterill. He's a good friend of mine. He stood up in my wedding, but he wasn't able to run around James Lightbody. Lightbody did a great job, and Joe is a very mobile guy. But at this level, it's the top teams and top defenses, to be able to just like run around people and make people miss and do that at that top level, you have to be truly world class. And that's what Pablo, Hoosh, Velt are. And so that's a big issue that until like even other American teams like have trouble, like those guys tend to win things in the US, and it's hard to find guys that can stay with them. So right now, that's where their big advantage is, the fact that they've married this athleticism to real professionalized coaching and systems. So all we can do is you can continue to professionalize your system and coaching and do everything to optimize what you can do, but you can only put the athletes out there that you have.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a big talking point just before the World Championships, obviously when they said it's going to the Olympics, was the NFL players.
Okay.
I mean, what's your thoughts on NFL players kind of joining up to the flag? Well, I mean, I know there was like Hoosh made the comments about how, and I think it was taken massively out of context when I saw it, that he is a better QB than Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, in his comments, it was the flag IQ side of it. But I mean, do you think it's like an easy step for a lot of these kitted players and like the NFL players?
Yeah. So Hoosh's comments were taken way out of context. So what he actually said was, today I'm better, but Patrick Mahomes should be better, and he would be better if he played enough or practiced enough. He's an NFL guy, and then people are, he says it's better. But I would say this: I would put it, if you said pick any NFL team you want, and any flag team made of NFL players that you want, coach them by NFL. They can only have NFL type coaches, or essentially not flag coaches. Okay, they can't have Pat and George. They can't have someone like me. They can't have any of that. Play, you get 1 or 2 weeks and play the U.S. men's national team. I'd be willing to put a lot of money that the U.S. men's national team would win. I put a lot on that. Give the NFL guys 6 months, or maybe not even that long, and some flag coaches, then superior athleticism will win out. But that being said, there are some details that need to be understood. People talk about the flag IQ and things like that. And that's some things. Obviously, there's flag pulling technique. Those are learnable things. And wide receivers in the NFL could transition, I think, really easily. Maybe they need to understand how to not charge somebody, but they'll get flagged the first game. But you got to separate what you can learn versus what you can't. And the thing that would be really interesting to me is, so Mina Kimes is an ESPN personality, and every year she does this chart of the fastest or average snap to throw time in the NFL. And normally what this chart looks like is there'll be 30 teams over here that are, call it 2.5 to 2.9 seconds per snap, something like that, okay? 2.5, 2.9. That'll be like 30 teams. And then there'll be like an outlier or two way over here at about 2.3 seconds, okay? You're playing flag at the high level World Championships. You got Michael Better blitzing you. You got Devin Turner. You got any of these people blitzing you. From snap to throw, you have 1.9 to 2.2. So it's actually like you have less time. And you're not under center. You're 10 yards back. Okay? There are some differences just with that timing. And that's for, that would be for, I think, any reasonable pocket QB. Even guys that are like quote-unquote mobile, like Mahomes or Josh Allen or whatever, I still think that would apply because these guys know how to pull flags and they're fast enough that, unless you have this sudden jerkiness, maybe a Lamar Jackson could be interesting, but I still think those guys are going to have that same time. And the NFL is littered with guys from college who came and they were great college QBs, but just that little increase in speed from college to NFL, they couldn't handle. They couldn't process fast enough. And I would surmise that there are going to be some NFL quarterbacks that transition might be too much. And I think it's really interesting. I think that actually the best comp to look at is, I think it was like back in 98 or something like that. They did these like air it out tournaments, and it was 4-on-4, and it was like the champions of the U.S. flag football world. And they played against, it was like Brett Favre, Wayne Corbett, like Brett Favre was the MVP that year. and Jeff Hostetler the year before, Jimmy Smith, Antonio Freeman, like guys that were NFL Pro Bowlers in their prime playing at the time. And I know the games were competitive. And if you look at the level of athlete that's playing now in flag football, it is so much higher than was playing back then. So much higher. Now, obviously, NFL players have gotten more athletic and stuff too, but back then, NFL players that was the top of the athlete crop, and that's still top of the athlete crop. So I don't think there's like that much of a difference between them in terms of which athletes are playing, but there's a big difference in terms of which athletes are playing flag now. There weren't the Velts and the Hooshes and the Marks and these guys. And so I think, like, even back then, the NFL guys, the in their prime NFL Pro Bowlers, were not dominating these guys. And I think right now it would be, like I said, I would put a lot of money that USA would win today. But if you give NFL guys 6 months, I would think that would be tough to beat. But again, it's still like Hoosh, Velt, Pablo, these guys move like NFL guys. They just happen to not be big enough to withstand, Hoosh is 140 pounds or whatever. Like, these guys are not big enough to withstand that pounding, but they could probably run around a lot of these NFL guys.
I think, like I said, the context of Hoosh's comments originally were taken massively out. So I think that's a big issue on that one. And I don't think anyone's ever said that the NFL players could not make it into USA. I think a lot of it was just like, it was almost like deemed that they were just going to walk up to a training session and go, I'll take this slot. So I think that's what set a lot of the community off. And but it was quite interesting to read. I mean, obviously, like if you're in any of the USA flag groups, as soon as they made these comments, every single person was talking about it. And I think from like a social media point of view and like a PR point of view, Hoosh made some massive waves in social media. And I think a lot of people then kind of went, well, who is this guy? Let's have a look at his stuff. And the viewing figures must have gone up massively for all like any highlight videos. So that was great to see.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
I had guys in my fantasy football league from the U.S. asking me about it. And so,
I mean, one last question on Ireland. Obviously, you were there for that one. You weren't necessarily you weren't coaching the GB women's team, but were you kind of keeping an eye on how they were doing and how GB was doing?
I mean, you know what's happening, and there are players on that team that I'm good friends with to this day. So, I was happy to see them win. And, just like this year, I was really happy to see, Grace playing again after tearing her ACL. And, so all that stuff, you emotionally want them to do well. But I think what can be hard about these tournaments versus a big bowl is I think it's pretty easy at big bowl to be like, I'm playing now. Okay, now I'm going to come watch your game, or now we're going to hang out and get a beer. But here, like, if you want to do well, it's like we would do our games, then I would go home and I would scout and I would put together game plans. And it's like, I'm sorry, I just don't have any ability to watch any of your stuff from an enjoyment perspective. Like, I probably, over the course of the Ireland tournament and the course of the Finland tournament, maybe found a half a day, not even a half every couple days, where I went and I watched because I was like, look, I need to like just turn my brain off from scouting for a second. I'm just gonna go watch and enjoy a game for a half. But I think I watched like a half of Great Britain men playing in Finland, and I watched a half of Great Britain women playing. Not even. I'd love to do more, and I was looking forward to watching all the games back on film, but obviously that's not the same. But it's just like when you're there, you have a job to do, and you have a commitment to your team, you have a commitment to your players, you have a commitment to your other coaches, and it's not just as much as you have a lot of friends there, or colleagues, or connections. It's you can say hi and dap each other up in the lunchroom, and then it's kind of got to be back to work.